Hello everyone and welcome to Pyanodons Mods. This is Otaku Showboat, and in this tutorial I'll be going over the Nexelit processing chain. As per usual, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to help make this tutorial series visible higher up in search results. You can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/OtakuShowboat, on Twitter at OtakuShowboat, visit my website at otakushowboat.com, as well as help to support my continued existence, as well as helping to accelerate the production of these tutorials by becoming a patron on Patreon at patreon.com/otakushowboat. You can also support Pyanodons mod development at patreon.com/pyanodon. As a disclaimer, Pyanodons mods are in a constant state of flux, so any numbers that I present may change. The mods for this particular save file are nearly identical to my stream save, the list of which is linked below on my website's stream schedule page. The only difference is that I am using the Infinity mod to help showcase this processing chain. So with that said, let's get started. So, Nexelit. Nexelit plates are used in a lot of things. You're going to need them, as you can see here at the start of this list, for a lot of Mark II stuff. You're going to need them for Mark III stuff. You're going to need them for Mark IV stuff. You're going to need them to get purple science via infused Nexelit cartridges. You're going to need them, maybe, if you're choosing this recipe for fuel rods. I would actually suggest a recipe that doesn't use uranium for the Mark I fuel rods. You're going to need them if you plan on making diesel in either of the methods that use Nexelit. They get used as a catalyst a lot for a lot of processes. They get used as raw ingredients for a lot of buildings a bit later on. A lot of this, as we have seen here thus far, is for specifically Mark II items. But you are going to come across a need for some Nexelit at Mark I if you so choose to use gas refineries at any point, as well as Tholen plants at any point. So the earliest in which I would say that you will be thinking about Nexelit is in your post-green science world, getting and preparing for your Circuit 2 chain. That'll be the earliest time frame that you will want to get Nexelit, and is the earliest that you can make Nexelit. Green science is the barrier here for even getting Nexelit in the first place, and it's going to be used pretty consistently across the board, even directly in the Circuit 2 chain itself, and even for things that are used in utility science. Like, it's an incredibly important material used across the board in a variety of things, including the big mines, including in the pyro processing, including for advanced small parts if you're using petroleum handling. It's just ubiquitous, and the later in the game that you get, the more Nexelit that you will need. The later in the game that you get, the more Nexelit that you will need, which is why it is very important for you to consider going further down the Nexelit processing chain. Now, here is the actual chain itself. As you can see, it's not that long by comparison to a lot of other ore processing chains, and after this initial step, it's pretty similar to a lot of the other processes in overall just complexity and the actual things involved here. So there is a difference, though, in that there are only really 3 total ways of getting raw Nexelit, your raw ore for Nexelit. One way is through tailings. That is your primary method. You will be converting tailings in an evaporator into raw Nexelit and tailings dust. The second way is ground boring. That is the next way that you will get access to it. Ground boring for Nexelit will require drilling fluid 2, and in my humble opinion, may actually be the smaller overall footprint. The third way, of course, is finding a rock somewhere on the map that is a Nexelit rock. I don't know if there are any handy. That is apparently a kimberlite pipe. They are blue, and they are somewhere on this map right here. This is what they look like. These Nexelit reserves. You can put a big mine on them, but you can't actually make these mines for a very, very long time. And to note that while the mine itself has a mining speed of 10, the mining time on the Nexelit reserve is 200%, so you're only going to get 5 per second out of here. 5 ore per second. Now, no matter how you get your raw ore, you will have to first wash it to make clean Nexelit, and then crush it into G1 after blue science. So at green science, this is all you can do. If you're at green science and you're just making your initial Nexelit for a few buildings and such that you may need it for, all you can do is wash it into clean and then actually cast the clean into plates. That's all you're going to be able to do at green science. At blue science, you can go all the way down to fine powder. This is the more traditional initial steps of an ore processing chain, going G1 to G2 and 3, this time adding rejects to it, rejects that go back into 1, so there is a loop there, a geometric series. I will also note that the raw ore to clean ore also has a geometric series in that you produce tailings out of this washing process. So you can loop back in additional tailings, and that will behave just like a geometric series. I have not taken that into account in any numbers that I present here today, but just know that that is a thing that you can do to increase your total amount of ore into your system just by making use of the tailings that is produced by this first step. So there is also this geometric series here that is the rejects back into G1. The rejects back into G1 that gets made into more rejects, into more G1, into more rejects. So yeah, this is a geometric series. The G2 will become G3, and then the G3 will become fine powder, and fine powder is what will convert into molten and then get cast into plates. This one's very simple for the molten recipe. It's just add borax, and actually casting the plates from molten is just add sand castings. At purple science, this was actually fixed recently. It used to be that the further processes was like there were 2 techs at utility science, and one of those techs included purple science and one of them didn't. This was a bug. This process going forward was supposed to be at purple science, and now it is again at purple science. So these next steps, going from fine powder into the pulp 4, this specific section all the way up to pulp 4 is unlocked at purple science. So this is going to be the first time you see like real outside inputs being required, is going into this setup after fine powder. And then at yellow science, you gain access to converting your pulp 4 into your high grade, reduced, and eventually sintered. So I will consider this as pulp 4 into sintered. So what does this all look like? Now, what I've built here is a setup that can convert 3 raw Nexelit per second in, which is what I consider to be a full throughput pipe of tailings. I cap my pipes at 1200 per second before bringing in additional pipelines, just because that is the maximum value of output of a offshore pump, and any higher value than this that you're trying to move through pipes will require inline pumps. Like, it gets rather insane trying to move more than 1200 units per second, and over distance it can even get difficult just moving 1200 to begin with. So I tend to cap things at 1200. I tend to cap my math at 1200 in terms of a single pipe. So going forward, we're assuming 3 raw Nexelit in total after the geometric series is how I will word this. Is after this geometric series of washing your raw ore, which produces as much tailings as you throw at it, I'm going to assume that you have a total of 3 and that you're ending up with 1 total clean Nexelit per second in the end going forward. So do bear this in mind. If you have a full yellow belt of raw in, this would end up being significantly bigger of a setup. Significantly bigger of a setup. So this is all you can do at green. Just by the way, Nexelit plates are cast directly from clean. You can cast them directly from raw, but there is really no point to that. And of course, there are hot air recipes for the standard and the raw. Always do hot air recipes when you can. Otherwise, you're just making it out of molten by adding sand castings. So, hot air process your clean Nexelit at green science. At blue science, you get access all the way up to the fine powder. And at blue science, you have access to Mark II buildings, so everything going forward here is going to be Mark II buildings. So a single Mark II jaw crusher will fully process that 1 per second of clean Nexelit in. Of course, multiply that accordingly if you have more raw ore in. This will produce stone as a byproduct, as will a process over here produce sand as an output. So definitely bear in mind you have 2 byproducts here at blue science to have to deal with. However, you could loop sand into the next step, which is the fine powder, because you will need a lot there. Screening your G1 into 2, 3, and rejects, you get a 60% chance of the G2, but you will always get a reject. You will always get a reject out of this. Always, always, always will get a reject. So bear that in mind. You have a 100% chance of a reject here, and it is a 60% chance of that reject becoming a new G1. So when solving for this geometric series, in terms of the total output, or the total sum of the G1 in, it will be 1 plus, the formula would be, it's like 1 minus 0.6 equals 1, so 1 divided by 0.4, something like that, and that's your total amount of G1, I think. I think I did that right. 1 over 0.4, so 2.5. Wow, that is... Is that, like, true? Are you operating fully? So 2 of these is 2.5. So if I see that this is operating fully without, like, stopping at any point, I can say with certainty that yes, it is actually 2.5 that is coming in here. So that is actually how you do the math. It is, think of it as the sum total of the input is your starting input, in this case 1, is equal to a value of 1 minus the probability, or the ratio. In this case, the probability, the total probability, is 0.6 of returning that G1. So you have a 1 minus 0.6. It's 1 minus 0.6 total S, or sum. So your sum, you have to divide the 1 by that 0.4 S, divide by 1 by 0.4, and you get 2.5 equals S. That is an easy-ish way of explaining how to do geometric series calculations. It gets a bit more complex when you have to start multiplying your probabilities out. But yeah, so this is actually 2.5 G1 in-ish right now for my initial 1 input. Which means it's 2.5 rejects out, so you need to process at least 2.5 rejects in these impact crushers. And it's 2.5 times 60% on the G2, which is 1.5, so just one Mark II secondary crusher will fulfill that 1.5. You will get 2.5 G3 plus 1.5 G3, or 4 G3 that you have to process into fine in the final step. 4 2.5. See, I've already done this math. I'm just doing this live for you to see where we get these values. So this is 2.5 total G1 in, 4 total G3, producing 4 total fine. You can see here that processing in 6 Mark II scrubbers, I think I have no, I have exactly 6 Mark II scrubbers here. It's going to consume 32 units per second of sand. This is slightly unfortunate. That's 2 per second more than a red belt can move in order to do this processing. And then, of course, if you're trying to do a full yellow belt of ore in, remember this is 3 ore in. If you're trying to do 15 ore in, you have to multiply that by 5. Multiply that by 5 to get the full processing going. And this value of sand by 5. This was just before recording this tutorial. It was just reduced in the amount of sand required for this recipe. It was just reduced by a whole value of 2 units per cycle. This was 10 sand per cycle. It is now 8 sand per cycle, and a lot of other ore processing sand requirements, sand input requirements, have also been halved. This is the only one that wasn't exactly halved, but it was reduced by 20% overall, which is pretty nice. It's just a shame that this isn't an even 30, but anyway, that would be a little bit difficult to accomplish, I think, in terms of the math of it all. But yeah, so you get 4 fine Nexelit powder by throwing water and sand here. Now, sand is as simple as soil, or water to soil to sand. It's water is sand. Water is sand. It's very simple. A setup for 32, that's like, well, think of something like this. Something like this. This is 60. This is 2 yellow belts here in terms of output. Just this setup here with 12 Mark II washers and 24 Mark II soil extractors. Remember, you can only do this at Blue Science anyway, so you should have Mark II stuff to get this done. So that's simple enough. It's just space. Space, that's all it is space. And the water input. Now, this will ultimately yield 2.8 plates per second for 3 ore in per second. Now, if we extrapolate that out to 15 per second of ore in, that is 14 plates per second out. So 15 in, 14 out. That's actually a pretty good number to have, like, memorized. 15 in to 14 out of ore into plates at Blue Science processing in total if you're processing 15 in. Otherwise, it's 3 to 2.8. And you're going to want as much Nexelit as you possibly can as you are transitioning into the land of Purple Science, because Purple Science itself is going to be the first huge required Nexelit draw. It'll be your first big, major, required demand on Nexelit plates, and you're going to be wanting to do this process. You are going to want to do this process to process your Nexelit. In fact, I would highly suggest at this point into the game to set up your drilling fluid too. I will actually say set up drilling fluid 2. As annoying as it may be to set up drilling fluid 2, do it. You will not regret it, and start getting your Nexelit at scale. Even though you can get it at tailings, and you can pretty easily make tailings as much as you want through dedicated setups, the space required for the tailings, I think, is still... It's either about the same, or it's a little bit more, and you have to deal with the actual pipe logistics of the tailings across a massive setup, and get it all routed together. I think that just logistically, even if they're relatively the same amount of space, or even if the tailings wins out in terms of the amount of space, I think just in terms of the logistics of it, I think that the drilling fluid 2 ground boring route is still a little bit easier to set up. I just got coffee on my shirt. Oh noes. Purple Science. Purple Science, the land of the wonderful pulps. The land of pulp. Step 1 is going to require sodium chlorate, glycerol, and syngas. Oh boy. Oh boy. Well, at Purple Science, I think you do get access to the Tholin-based glycerol. I think that's at Purple. Let's check. Let us check. No, you do not until yellow, so you will not have access to Tholin-based glycerol. So, what are your options on glycerol? Well, nichrome to oleochems to get some glycerol, or collagen, or skin, which is used in collagen. So, choice between nichrome and collagen here. This may be one of those times where I say probably go collagen, maybe. I mean, it's going to be painful either way. Nichrome is quite expensive overall. You should already have, I think, some higher level of processing of your chrome setup. So maybe you're having no more nichrome issues. Maybe you've taken care of that by this point, so you can feel comfortable doing the oleochemical route to get glycerol, but you then have the wonderful time of having to deal with a whole bunch of oleochemicals, as well as the glycerol. So, as bad as it is, maybe you should actually just spend the collagen here. As for the sodium chlorate, we've seen this before in the aluminium chain. This is going to be a massive draw or demand on sodium chlorate. Unlike the aluminium processing chain that required sodium chlorate, which required like very little sodium chlorate here at the aluminate stage, and unlike in the titanium pulp 1 area that needed it, this one needs 12 per second ish, 12-ish. No, not 12, it's 4 in, so 4... Ay. 12 over 6 times 4, 8. 8 per second, and that's... And then, remember, you're multiplying this all by 5 if you're doing a full yellow belt in. So, not an insignificant amount of sodium chlorate required here, especially when you bear in mind that it's 2 salt per sodium chlorate. So 16 per second salt in is required here, and fortunately you can have productivity here, but even on an increased number of module slots at this point in the game, unless you've already gone and done your circuit 3s, unless you've already done circuit 3s, purple science means that you can actually finally truly start your circuit 3s if you haven't already. You might have access to higher level productivity modules, but even then, and I can already see that this might get removed at some point. Pyanodon really likes taking away every recipe that has productivity modules. It's like, why don't you just remove them across the board? Why even have productivity modules if you're just going to keep taking them away from all these recipes? But anyway, just bear in mind it's a huge draw on salt, so there's going to be a big footprint overall in terms of space to produce enough salt for the sodium chlorate. This was also made better. This was also made slightly better at some point in the relatively recent past, but it is not completely better yet. It is not completely better, specifically for this Nexelit Pulp 1 recipe. Specifically this Nexelit Pulp recipe, I think it just needs to continue to be adjusted, brought more in line with what the requirements are for the aluminium and titanium recipes. You know, that's like a factor of 10 too high compared to the others. And bearing in mind, this is, of course, targeted 3 or in. So, yeah, whatever. Moving on, and syngas. I'm not going to talk about syngas. We should know how to get syngas by now, and we should know how to get acetone by now. Going into pulp 2, just add water and acetone, aka tholins. Tholin-based acetone. Pulp 3 is going to require organic solvent. Ooh, organic solvent. I have talked about organic solvent several times already. I'm just going to throw this out there. By the way, if you're wondering about how to get the recipe icons on the map here, all these icons on the map view, if you hit F4 to open up your debug settings, it is this option down near the bottom of the list, Show Recipe Icons on Map. Tick that checkbox and you will be able to see all of the recipe icons on your map view. So this is my newest organic solvent. This is the newest organic solvent setup that I have. It is relatively small. I say relatively, it's just by comparison to everything else that I have over here. I came in and I designed this specifically for my stream save the other day. And this produces like 180 something per second of organic solvent in total, and it produces enough syngas, more than enough syngas, to actually feed this entire setup, and it has the actual acetone from Tholins right on site, so you don't even need to throw anything at this. This is completely self-sufficient. This setup is completely self-sufficient. The only input is water. Water is the only input, and with something like the water wells mod or the or any sort of like water fill, anything like that, this becomes just a copy paste to have as much glorious refined or as much glorious organic solvent as you could ever desire, and it gives half the amount out as ammonia. Half the amount of organic solvent is going to be ammonia too, so you can actually use this as some ammonia that you may want to use across the board. So something like that is highly suggested to set up just in general to have organic solvent, especially by Purple Science. You can easily make a setup like that for your organic solvent. At least you should be able to easily make something like that for your organic solvent. Moving on, Pulp 3 into Pulp 4 will require pressured air, which is simple, just the pump, just a pump to get your air, and then Armac 12. The last time we've seen Armac 12, we've seen it now. We saw it in the very first tutorial for iron. That was the last time we've seen Armac 12. Armac 12 is oleochemicals, lead, and ammonia. Now, I've previously covered how to get all of this. I just showed you a way of getting ammonia, especially since you already have organic solvent, with the next step also requiring ammonia through Armac 12. Hey, guess what you can do there? And then oleochemicals. Hey, remember you needed glycerol way back there? Hey, here's Armac 12 that can actually use some of those oleochemicals if you have chosen to expend some nichrome. So there's some ideas for you here. And this will actually produce a little bit of tailings, so you can have another geometric series bringing back your tailings if you so desire. The next step is going to be rather interesting, and this will actually end your Purple Science, or this is no longer at Purple Science. The Purple Science ends here, ends with the production of your Pulp 4. So in terms of the actual outside inputs at Purple Science, you've got Armac 12, you've got organic solvent, acetone, which, if you're making organic solvent, you have the acetone, and of course the glycerol. But again, if you have the Armac 12, chances are you have spare glycerol as well. So ultimately, we could say that in terms of the most complex items here, it's Armac 12 and organic solvent here, and then a couple of things that are actually involved in the production of those that get used as well. Now, I have not done this math to determine exactly how much the output is, but let's just say that it is going to be a requisite boost from 2.8. I think this ends up being somewhere along the lines of a lot more than that. A lot more than that. Yeah, that's. I'll let you do that math between all of the stuff here going forward. At Yellow Science, you will now need to input aluminium plates, iron oxide, and graphite. A small amount of aluminium plates, a very small amount of aluminium plates, a not very small amount of iron oxide, but iron oxide you can just get from water, basically. by classifying sand into gravel. Classifying sand into gravel will give you a bunch of iron oxide as a byproduct, as well as crushed quartz, so you should have as much iron oxide as you could ever desire, especially by the point in the game where you are at utility science. You are also probably doing at the very least the high-grade aluminium, or at the very least your purple or your blue science level of aluminium. I have to always remember aluminium's a little bit different in terms of its overall processing chain, so you should at least be able to get your blue science level of processing done by now, so you should have plenty of aluminium plates. Aluminium plates aren't actually used that much, period. They're primarily used in duralumin stuff. It's primarily used as duralumin and not as aluminium. So having this as a sink of aluminium, that's fine, like whatever, small amount. And then graphite is just coke, which again is just coal, which is just mushrooms, which is just water. So that is fine. This will make you some refined pulp and slurry, both of which convert into your high-grade Nexelit. The slurry will need boric acid and methanol. Well, it's a good thing we just talked about this organic solvent, because guess what? There is a recipe for methanol that exists that is olefins plus organic solvent to make methanol plus petroleum gas. Olefins can be made out of aromatics. Now, bear in mind, I've got productivity modules here. This will change, I can guarantee, because Pyanodon is Pyanodon, and he should just remove all the productivity module use from literally everything in his mods at this point, because it's becoming annoying, all the changes that are being brought in on a, like, every time I bring or show anything that has productivity modules in it, it ends up no longer having productivity modules as an option anymore. But that's a separate topic entirely, about how Pyanodon is actively removing the fun from his own mods, but yeah, as we shall continue. Aromatics, biotic-based aromatics. This, I know, is already changed in the code to no longer use productivity modules. This change is coming to no longer use productivity modules. This change I don't think is yet, nor is this yet, but it likely will. But it's easy to adjust to not having productivity modules here. I mean, I'm using level 1s here, so that's like 16% at 4 module slots, and that's like, even at the basic level, you probably, if you're just running vanilla, you don't have this many module slots to begin with at Mark II, so yeah. Anyway, ignoring all of that, there is a recipe to convert organic solvent and olefins into methanol and petroleum gas. So there is your methanol. This, I think, is the best way. At this point in time, as of the recording of this particular tutorial video, this is what I think is the best way of getting methanol. This would be the best way of getting methanol. Yes, it is a big footprint overall. It is a big footprint overall if we look at this and all of the Relesia and all of the mushrooms that feed into this, bearing in mind that this is 182 mushroom plantations as well as 54 Relesia plantations feeding into a fair amount of gasifiers to make aromatics, and then converting that aromatics into olefins. Over 900 olefins, by the way, in this setup here. It can make a lot of methanol. It can make a lot of methanol. So that is fine, and then refer to the boron processing tutorial for boric acid. As for the refined pulp, this is just a direct conversion. No inputs, no outside things to deal with. No, it's just evaporation into your high grade. Reduction is exactly the same as we have seen in the past for the vast majority of other ore processing processes. You get sodium sulfate, diesel, and pressured air in with your high grade to produce reduced, and then at sintered you get a fuel in with lime, syngas, and pressured air from your reduced, and you make 2 sintered per reduced, so it is always 2 sintered per 1 reduced per 1 high grade. I guess in this case it's technically per 6 high grade. So 6 high grade here into 1 reduced into 2 sintered, so that is 3 high grade per sintered. I think that's how that math works. 3 high grade per sintered. And then you can make all the molten on the planet out of your sintered. And then make all the plates on the planet from that. So lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of plates. And by this point in the game, you will need them. You will need them. I will say with absolute certainty, you will need them by this point in the game. And with that, we have finished the entire Nexelit processing chain. With that, I would like to thank you all for watching. This has been Otaku Showboat. If you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to help keep this series higher up in the YouTube search results. You can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Otaku Showboat, Twitter at Otaku Showboat, visit my website at otakushowboat.com, and help to support my continued existence as well as help to accelerate the production of this tutorial series by becoming a patron on Patreon at patreon.com/otakushowboat. You can also help support Pyanodons Mods development at patreon.com/Pyanodon, where you will also be able to get all of the latest news and insights into the development of Pi alien life, as well as future modules for the mod that are produced, depending on when you watch this. Again, thank you all for watching, and I will be back on the next tutorial, where we will be covering the niobium processing chain. I hope to see you all then.